The war in Ukraine has entered a brutal new chapter. Russian forces, determined to reclaim lost ground, have launched a fierce offensive in the Kursk region. This strategic region, partially recaptured by Ukraine in August, has become a focal point in the conflict. Reports indicate that Russia has committed significant resources to this offensive, aiming to reverse recent setbacks. The intensity of the Russian push is undeniable. Military analysts suggest that Russian troops are advancing at an unprecedented pace. They have already retaken a substantial portion of the territory lost in the summer counter-offensive. The Kremlin seeks to consolidate its hold on the region, viewing it as crucial to its broader war aims. The presence of North Korean and Russian troops in the Kursk region underscores the significance of this battle. Estonia's defense minister has described Russia's commitment to retaking Kursk as going all in. This offensive represents a pivotal moment in the conflict, with both sides heavily invested in the outcome. The world watches anxiously as the fighting intensifies. The outcome in Kursk could significantly impact the trajectory of the war and have lasting consequences for the region. The human cost of this conflict continues to mount, with countless lives lost and futures shattered. Despite the ferocity of the Russian offensive, Ukrainian forces are not yielding ground easily. Armed with Western-supplied missiles and unwavering resolve, they are mounting a determined defense of Kursk. Ukrainian troops are utilizing a combination of tactics, including strategic strikes on Russian positions and equipment. Reports indicate that Ukraine has successfully deployed Western-supplied missiles, including the British Storm Shadow, against Russian targets in Kursk. These advanced weapon systems have provided Ukraine with a much-needed boost in firepower. The Ukrainian military has claimed successful strikes on key Russian infrastructure, including the headquarters for the Kursk offensive. While Russia claims to have intercepted some of these missiles, the impact of Ukraine's counteroffensive is undeniable. Independent military analysts have confirmed significant Russian losses in the region. The effectiveness of Ukraine's resistance has slowed the Russian advance, though the situation remains fluid. Ukraine's determination to defend its territory is evident in the courage and resilience of its soldiers and citizens. Despite facing a numerically superior enemy, they have demonstrated unwavering resolve. The international community continues to provide military and humanitarian aid, recognizing Ukraine's right to defend itself against aggression. As the ground battle rages in Kursk, Ukraine faces another deadly threat, a relentless barrage of drone attacks. On November 26, 2024, Kiev experienced the largest drone assault since the war began. Over 188 drones, along with ballistic missiles, targeted multiple regions across Ukraine, plunging the country into darkness. This terrifying wave of attacks targeted critical infrastructure, including power grids and residential areas. While Ukrainian air defenses managed to neutralize a significant number of the drones, the impact was devastating. Cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa were plunged into darkness, and essential services were disrupted. The psychological toll of these attacks on Ukrainian civilians is immeasurable. The constant threat of death from above has created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Hospitals, schools, and homes are not immune to the destruction, leaving many feeling vulnerable and hopeless. These drone attacks represent a new and terrifying phase in the conflict. They highlight the lengths to which Russia is willing to go to break Ukraine's spirit. The international community has condemned these attacks as indiscriminate and inhumane, calling for an immediate cessation. Despite facing stiff resistance in Kursk, Russia's military campaign continues to gain momentum. Reports suggest that Russian troops are making advances at a rate unseen since the early days of the invasion. The capture of the village of Kopanki in the Kharkiv region is a testament to their renewed offensive capabilities. Independent military analysts estimate that Russia has seized a substantial amount of territory in recent weeks. This advance, coupled with the relentless drone and missile attacks, paints a grim picture for Ukraine. The Kremlin's strategy appears to be a war of attrition, aiming to wear down Ukrainian defenses through sheer firepower. The human cost of this conflict continues to escalate, with civilian casualties mounting on both sides of the border. The United Nations estimates that millions have been displaced from their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. The humanitarian crisis deepens with each passing day. The international community grapples with how to respond to Russia's escalating aggression. Sanctions and diplomatic pressure have thus far failed to deter the Kremlin. The question remains, how much more suffering must Ukraine endure before a peaceful resolution is reached? Section 5. A secret arms deal. As the conflict rages, revelations of a secret arms deal have sent shockwaves through the international community. Reports have surfaced that the United Kingdom supplied Ukraine with dozens of Storm Shadow cruise missiles weeks before authorizing their use against targets within Russia. This revelation has sparked controversy and raised questions about the West's involvement in the conflict. The Storm Shadow missiles, with their extended range and precision strike capabilities, have significantly bolstered Ukraine's offensive capabilities. The UK's decision to provide these weapons while kept under wraps demonstrates a deepening commitment to supporting Ukraine's fight for survival. This covert arms deal highlights the complexities of the conflict and the delicate balance of power at play. While Western nations have officially refrained from providing weapons for use within Russia, this revelation suggests a willingness to operate in a legal grey area. The potential for escalation and unintended consequences remains a serious concern. The Kremlin has condemned the UK's actions, accusing the West of fueling the conflict and prolonging the suffering. This revelation has further strained relations between Russia and the West, dimming hopes for a negotiated settlement. Section 6. Scars across the battlefields. The human cost of the conflict is etched into the very landscape of Ukraine. From the besieged cities to the ravaged countryside, the scars of war are everywhere. The November 25th attacks on Kharkiv and Odessa serve as stark reminders of the conflict's devastating toll on civilians. In Kharkiv, the number of injured from a Russian missile strike continues to rise, overwhelming hospitals already stretched thin. The attack on Odessa left 8 injured and caused significant damage to civilian infrastructure. In Zaporizhzhia, a massive drone attack left 1 child injured and residential buildings in ruins. These attacks, tragically commonplace in this brutal war, underscore the indiscriminate nature of the violence. Civilians are bearing the brunt of the conflict, caught in the crossfire of a war they did not choose. The physical and psychological scars of this conflict will linger long after the fighting has ceased. International humanitarian organizations are struggling to provide aid and support to those affected by the conflict. The sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis is overwhelming, with millions displaced and in desperate need of food, shelter, and medical care. Section 7. The world takes sides. As the conflict in Ukraine rages on, the international community remains deeply divided. The United Nations, tasked with maintaining international peace and security, finds itself grappling with its role in this crisis. Recent statements by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres highlight these divisions. Guterres publicly criticized the United States for supplying anti-personnel mines to Ukraine, citing the Ottawa Convention, which bans their use. This criticism underscores the ethical complexities of the conflict and the challenges of navigating international law in the midst of war. Meanwhile, NATO countries are strengthening their support for Ukraine. Germany, in a significant move, has announced plans to bolster Ukraine's arms production, initially focusing on drones and ammunition. This initiative, funded by interest earned on frozen Russian assets, underscores NATO's commitment to bolstering Ukraine's long-term defense capabilities. The conflict in Ukraine has become a proxy war, with global powers taking sides and providing military and financial aid to their respective allies. This polarization of the international community has heightened tensions and diminished hopes for a swift diplomatic resolution. Section 8. Europe on the brink. As the conflict in Ukraine escalates, concerns are growing about the potential for wider European involvement. Military analysts and experts are increasingly discussing the possibility of European ground troops being deployed to Ukraine, particularly if US military aid were to decrease significantly. This potential scenario, while currently hypothetical, highlights the precariousness of the situation. A reduction in US military support, a possibility under a potential future Trump presidency, could create a security vacuum in Europe. This vacuum, in turn, could necessitate a more active role for European nations in defending Ukraine. The deployment of European ground troops to Ukraine would mark a significant escalation of the conflict, with far-reaching consequences. It could potentially draw NATO directly into the conflict, raising the spectre of a wider European war. The risks associated with such a scenario are enormous and underscore the need for a diplomatic solution. The international community must work tirelessly to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The potential consequences of inaction are too great to contemplate. The future of Ukraine and indeed the stability of Europe hang in the balance. Section 9. A world on edge. The conflict in Ukraine is not merely a regional crisis, it is a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in the 21st century. The ripple effects of this war are felt globally, impacting energy prices, food security, and geopolitical alliances. The conflict has exposed the shortcomings of the international security architecture, highlighting the limitations of institutions like the United Nations in effectively addressing interstate conflict. It has also revealed deep divisions within the international community, hindering efforts to forge a unified response. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine is a tragedy for all involved. For the people of Ukraine, it is a fight for their very survival, a struggle to preserve their sovereignty and way of life. For the world, it is a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the urgent need for peace. The international community must prioritize diplomacy and dialogue in seeking a resolution to this conflict. The alternative, a protracted war with the potential to escalate, is too horrific to contemplate. The world is watching, hoping for peace and demanding an end to the bloodshed.